You're listening to the Sanditon Chronicles, where we talk all things Sanditon and Sanditon adjacent. Come along with us as we dissect all of your favorite characters, scenes, and dialogue. We have so much to tell you. Hi guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm Maureen.
I'm Janice.
And today we are bringing you our talk about the Parkers. And it might seem kind of, I don't know, I always think, oh, it's the Parkers. That we've seen them before. We know who they are, but they had very different roles in the second season, I think. I think they did a really good job with the writing for them for the second season. They showed growth, although maybe not as much in Tom as I would have liked to have seen. But I think that'll come in season 3. I think it's a progressional thing with him.
Well, it's better, that's for sure. He's listening.
Yes. I think he has a little more fear that he didn't have in the first season. I think the first season, I mean, the first season, he was very panicked about the lack of funding. And he was constantly trying to get more. And there were those scenes we talked about where he was very despondent and you could tell it was heavy on his heart, but he didn't have really fear. He had him keep doing it. And now in season 2, he's more cautious, where it's not just, go do the work and I'll find a way to pay it. It's wait, we have to make sure we have the funding for this. We got to make sure that this is right. We're only going to go with safe bets here.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it changed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's face it, his lack of funding got found out in season 1, and he has more investors because of Sydney's wife, now widow, she has the investors. It's not even just Sydney. And also now Mary and Arthur both know to question some things.
Exactly.
And also Lady D, but at least Lady D isn't so much saying I'm gonna withdraw my funding. She isn't saying that anymore.
No, she's way more into giving. I think even having Eliza have her share of money in the town, I think that has made Lady Denham insistent on, no, I'm not withdrawing my money. Almost like, no, this is my town. This is not yours. You don't get to save my town, kind of thing. So right. Because there was that one scene on the boardwalk where she had that conversation with Tom.
Right. And how are he's like, I plan on repaying her everything to her. So how they're going to do it, it's a mystery.
Yeah. And I think it's as cautious as he's being. I think that and this is kind of how my husband thinks too, which is why I think he's thinking this way, that if it doesn't come out of his head, he doesn't understand the validity of it because he hasn't thought it through. It didn't process through his processor. He didn't think, okay, this is why we need it. This is when we need it. This is how we need it. So if it hasn't come from his own mind, he's like, no, it's too risky. Like with the theater, because that would be a moneymaker. That's entertainment. People would be coming to the town. Not only would people be paying money to the town, but it's not like a movie theater of our movie theater where you just put up a movie. It's actresses would come to act things out, to put on plays, to put on shows. That alone would bring people in there. And so he's not thinking it through, but I think it's because it's not his idea and it's not a selfish thing. I think he is very cautious over things. He has not weighed the analysis of cost and benefits or cost and expense.
Well, and also because he doesn't feel like he has to look at because he's so focused on the army being there.
Because that's something that's right in front of his eyes that he can physically see.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just a shame.
Yeah. Even though it turns out to be a folly. So it will be interesting to see what happens in season 3 with that whole thing, with developing this town. Where will that effort go this time? Yeah. So it'll be interesting.
And I think he'll be more receptive to Arthur in season 3 because Arthur was proven right several times in season 2. And Tom had to eat it.
And especially by the end of episode 6, he's acknowledging that.
Yeah.
He's really recognizing how much Arthur has contributed. And that's one of the ways Arthur has changed greatly. He was a good friend to people, especially reaching out to
Georgiana.
Thank you. I don't know why I was spacing on that name. Reaching out to Georgiana for many things, dancing with her, helping her go to the regatta, but he wasn't so much a help to Tom. it was all about him and Mary at that point, his sister. And so, yeah, now he's not so focused on how he feels, and he's focused on what he can do to help with the town
Yeah.
and with his other friends. Of course, he befriends Colbert and he befriends Georgiana even more. They become even closer.
Hmm.
And I just, of course, I think I've said this before, and I probably said it when we were doing some of the recaps. I am just so pleased at how much Arthur has grown and
Yeah.
changed. He has probably in season 2 one of the biggest arcs
Hmm.
ever.
I'd agree with that. And it's because he doesn't have Diana hovering. He can be his own man, because you saw glimpses of that in season 1, which I think it was smart to play it out this way in order to
Yeah.
get Turlough to have like a decent part. Because when he was dancing, for instance, in episode 8 of season 1, when he was dancing and spinning around and freaking out, he was happy, he was joyful. And then Diana was the one who said, we need to leave. And he was upset at that. He didn't want to leave. So now, and he says something about it in season 2. I don't remember the exact verbiage he says, but talking about how it's amazing how light he is with Diana at home and away.
Right. And she evidently is the real hypochondriac.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it spilled over into Arthur.
Yeah, because he's the baby brother, and she, when their parents died, she became like mom. And of course, that wasn't said. That's just my view of it. That she became like Mama Bear to him, and it was, she didn't want to lose him. She didn't want to whatever. And because she had this fear about herself, she just assumed, oh no, everything is, I have to protect him at all costs.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was nice to see that change in him. It was nice to see Arthur, because we've always loved Arthur. I mean,
right.
Who in this fandom has not always loved Arthur? He's been a delight from start to finish. That's all he's ever been. It's a delightful thing. And I like to see not only the change from being more authoritative in season 2 and sticking to his, because he fought for things. Yeah, with the theater, he kind of backed down, but he kept bringing it up to Tom. So he's kind of being strategic about bringing that up to him. But he was forceful with how he felt about the military. He made his opinions very clear without sugarcoating anything.
Right.
And of course, when Lockhart hurt Georgiana, Arthur was one of the people right there. No, you're not going to do this again.
And he's the one that saved the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because he went to the shop owners and convinced them to give them another chance, to extend them for a few more days.
Yep.
Till they could get them taken care of. And that was no small achievement.
No.
They didn't show us how that happened, and they didn't play that out in front of us, but we know that it did. Yeah, he contributed so much more. And even when the elephant was canceled, he was trying, he got a hold of a horse
too.
And he was going to try and do that. Of course, he got overstepped by
Tom
Colonel
and
Lennox.
Colonel Lennox.
Yeah, but he was doing everything in his power.
Because even in that situation, it was Tom who was complaining to Colonel Lennox, and Colonel Lennox said, well, I know I could have a solution. And Tom didn't even, that's what makes me so sad. And I think by the end it's corrected, but Tom gave so little thought to Arthur. Arthur said, I'll fix this, brother. I'll handle this. Let me do this. And then when Lennox said, well, I might have a solution, it's like Tom didn't even think of Arthur at all. He didn't even remember Arthur was trying to fix it. So by the time, so he didn't stop Arthur from going to fix it. He didn't warn him, hey, you can stop doing all the extensive work you're doing because I already have it. None of that. So but I think that needed to happen for Tom. I think Tom needs to learn things in small portions, because I think that's just his character.
And, the balloon was obviously a fun contribution to the series. Yes, I agree. And Arthur is just, he becomes more sure of himself and more decisive as the episodes go on.
Yeah.
And I'm just real impressed with him. And of course, we love Turlough. He's just
in everything he does. He's so good.
Yeah. And he plays very different parts. It's not like it's typecast. He plays a lot of different parts. So
and what we know of him as a human being too is just, I mean, who doesn't like Turlough?
Right. Yeah.
But the way he plays Arthur is so sweet, and it's so selfless.
Caring. Yeah, and caring. And I think about the scenes when they're getting all the the information first to begin with about Sydney, and
Mhm.
then when they get finally at the end, of course, get his stuff. And so they find out what's going on and how sweet Arthur is about the ring, that Sydney would want you to have it, Tom.
Yeah.
The ring that we never saw prior to that episode. So we can't say, oh, that was one. I went back and looked. He did not have a ring
It's
on.
not in season 1.
Sydney did not have a ring on.
Because
no.
it's funny because when I saw that scene, I was like, I think he might have. I think I remember him doing this. But isn't it Tom who would do that with the ring?
Tom had a ring on his wedding finger earlier.
So it was the suggestion was so powerful that I immediately was like, no, I think I remember him doing that.
No, at least I looked very thoroughly and I could not see anything. So I think, but it's all right. I mean, it's what they came up with to sort of make it more personal.
Yeah. And I think, maybe it was something that his father handed down to Sydney, or that Sydney got when his father died, something like that, maybe. I mean, he's his second son, so
yeah,
Tom would have inherited most of it, but there might have been something special that their father handed down to Sydney that he didn't wear, but he kept safe somewhere. So,
yep.
But I think the other thing about Arthur too is watching how smart he is, because I think we kind of saw him as this goofy, lovable teddy bear in season 1, but he's smart and he can read people. And I think I'm thinking specifically of that scene when Lennox kind of hoodwinked Tom into gambling at that ball, and it was not Turlo. It was Arthur who was like, no, I don't think we should do this. And the expression on his face was very, very clear that no, we can't do this. This is not going to end well. This is going to be bad. He could read the room and he could read what was going on. He knew it's not like, I mean, we've seen Arthur like every character who's been on Sanditon, right? With maybe 1 or 2 exceptions with an overtly bad person, but he's liked everyone except for Colonel Lennox. And that right there should be an indication of, okay, maybe he's not a good guy. If the guy who likes everybody, the guy who gets along with everybody doesn't like him, maybe, and of course with Lockhart, there was a difference there, but Lockhart's a charmer and he has charisma. So it's.
And he set about intentionally to deceive, Lockhart did. Lennox ended up deceiving, but it wasn't so much like he started to from the very beginning. Whereas Lockhart knew he was being deceitful.
Yeah. Lockhart was trying to trick people into believing something that wasn't there. I think Lennox is just so used from going to town and putting on the charm of an army captain or army colonel. And I think that's just what he does for his position. He needs things from the people. He needs things from the town. He needs cooperation. So he automatically just exudes it. So what he did was hid his real character, but he didn't set up to deceive anybody necessarily. He just hid.
That's right.
What he is.
Right.
And I think that Arthur could pick up on that.
And he may have had just a little bit against the military to begin with. So because they're braggadocious, so much more so than what Arthur likes or is used to.
And they're more, not that Arthur isn't masculine. He's maybe more feminine than the other male characters on the show. But I think you think of the army and the military, it's crass and it's built on ego, and those are things that Arthur does not possess. He does not possess ego. He does not possess crass. He's not crass in any way, but he also is not he's not self-involved at all.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But didn't they say at one point why he didn't like the military? Did they say? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
I didn't think so either, but I thought maybe because I remember Tom was asking why, but I don't think he was ever.
I just think it was not his cup of tea, and so he stayed away from it. And I also like the fact that Arthur not only figured out that Tom should not be gambling that first time, but when he didn't go with him and Tom lost the money or created a debt, I should say, what Arthur, when they were talking about it with Mary and not revealing to Mary the whole truth, that she'd lost this money, he just implied it to Arthur. And Arthur was very much encouraging him to talk to the colonel about to take care of the shopkeepers and, all of that kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, he was very much an encourager. And especially when you think about in this last episode, when
Mhm.
he and Mary and Tom are all talking about the debt now that has been revealed, right?
In
That he
the final
lost.
episode of season 2.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
season
That's
2, episode 6, where they're talking about it. And Mary says, I've been doing some calculations. Here is the total owed to our shopkeepers and hostleries by the colonel and his men. And this is your debt to the colonel. And of course, Tom's starting to
Mhm.
apologize to Mary again. And she's like, apologies serve no purpose. She was
Yep.
definitely a problem solver. And this came out definitely stronger in season 2. In season 1, we see her, her backbone come up after it is revealed that the workers haven't been paid in episode 5, right?
Yep.
And then she says, right now we need to decide what is to be done. We must simply borrow from the children's savings. And so that's when the package arrives from Sydney. His possessions arrive. So the discussion gets interrupted, but then we know they decided to take that tact they when he and Arthur are talking about what they're going to do to confront the colonel about this money later in the episode. And he and excuse me, and Tom admits that Arthur, that he needs to listen to Arthur's advice, that he's going to go to Arthur for advice. And he says, now that we have dealt with one treacherous interloper, which was, of course, whose name I can't
Oh,
think of,
Charles Lockhart.
Lockhart. Why did I space that out? I was almost said Colburn. It's all these C's. All these people have C names, anyway. And he says, we've dealt with one treacherous interloper. We must deal with the other, but how? And Arthur says, what would Sydney say here were he standing here in front of me? So
Mhm.
Arthur has also figured out how to work with Tom,
Yep.
how to get Tom to think through his situation and
Mhm.
what would be the solution. Because
Yeah.
obviously Tom depended a lot on Sydney,
Mhm. A
much more
lot.
than I think much more than we realized even in most of season 1. We
Mhm.
knew that he kept going to him to help get people in, but obviously it was way more than that.
Yeah.
And then Tom says he would tell me the only way to conquer a man like the colonel is to beat him at his own game.
Mhm.
And obviously Arthur is such a supporter of that and goes with him to try and solve the problem and take care of the issue. I mean, he is, his support.
Mhm. And I think it's so beautiful to watch him become that.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. The and when they confront Colonel Lennox, it's just so beautiful how that
Mhm.
goes.
And the
And
look of pride on Arthur, and it's
mhm,
not pride for himself, it's he's proud of Tom. And
for
he's standing
standing
there.
up.
Yes. Just watching them stand right next to each other. And Arthur has this grin on his face, but he's also got like steel in his eyes. And he's so excited that Tom is finally getting, what the right thing.
That's exactly right. And this is when Tom says to Lennox, then so what the situation is, this gamble they're going to do. And he says, then you will pay every penny that you owe the town. You will write off my debt and you will leave Sanditon never to return if he loses.
Mhm.
And Lennox says, very well, one round of hazard. And I love Arthur says, Colonel, no, this time we choose the game. What
Mhm.
a great line that was. Colonel, will you stand or choose another card? So that's when the game is actually started. That's the next
Mhm.
line. Because Arthur is the dealer.
Yeah.
and they're playing blackjack basically.
Yeah. And you
21.
can see that Arthur's a little concerned when Tom calls for another
Stands
card.
when Stan no, Tom stands pat, doesn't he?
He doesn't, I think he takes another card without looking at his cards.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right.
And Arthur has, you can see that fear in him, but there's also, he trusts Tom in the same moment. And I think
Right.
I want to find and surround myself with people who are like Arthur Parker, who
Right.
can have that amount of trust in who you are and that can be so gracious. I mean, he had several reasons to be mad at Tom
Oh
throughout
yeah.
season 2. And yet he stood there supporting his brother and still putting his faith in his brother. And I think that's part of what makes Tom better and better and better is because of the people that he's surrounded with, like Arthur and Mary. They are what
Yes.
makes Tom better. I think without them,
Uh,
Tom would be horrible
yeah,
and he
no,
wouldn't
I
succeed at
agree.
anything.
No, he needs that support. Like everybody needs support. And
Yeah.
especially those idea people, you know, they
Yeah.
have to have the support. So yeah, and of course when they win, it's just glorious, you know.
The look on their faces. I mean, Tom, you could tell Tom was also a little terrified. But the sheer relief and the elation that was in it was like Tom had sheer relief, but Arthur
Yeah.
gave way to elation when it happened when they won.
Yeah, and I love the way they sort of again honored Sydney in this part
Yeah.
because they were like my late brother and I could never agree on the nature of this game. I always thought it was a game of luck, but he claimed it demanded strategy.
Yeah.
And says if I had put all my faith in luck, I'd be long gone. So I guess he was agreeing with him. And Arthur asks, you know, if Tom wants a card, and then Tom goes on to say, then again, I never won a game against Sydney.
Mhm.
So I have to concede that he may have been right. And he gets 20 and says, Colonel, can you match me or do you surrender? Or 20 game to Arthur because Colonel, of course, his cards came up at 19, I think it was,
Mhm.
which is why he had held instead of getting yet another card.
Yeah.
So, and he'd gotten several cards. But anyway, it's just that whole interaction and how they honor Sydney in the writing and
Mhm.
how Tom pulls it off. It's just so wonderful.
Yeah. And you know, it's that scene is beautiful because Sydney is littered throughout it, but it's Arthur and Tom working together as well. So it's like all the Parker brothers are right there in that scene working together to overcome this person who is hoodwinking the town.
Yes,
That's what you see.
definitely.
And who Arthur and Tom are as people, that can even be demonstrated in how Fraser was looking at them, right? When he wasn't even wanting his colonel to win. He wanted Tom and Arthur to win. And when they won, he was
No.
excited because that's the kind of people that the Parkers are. Because Tom is not bad in essentials. He just isn't, he doesn't always think things through, which is crazy
That's
because
right.
that's how he tries to do everything. It's just he needs help with his thought process.
And he just makes assumptions about people that are not
Yeah.
necessarily true.
Mhm.
And so it's great when they go and pay the shopkeepers. And Tom says, you know, to them, please, there you go, feed your friends. You know, he was
Yeah.
handing out the money. And Arthur says, you did the Parker name proud. You did Sydney proud. And Tom's like, no, Arthur, we did.
Mhm.
You know, that was such a great moment for them together.
We waited 2 full seasons plus years in between for someone to give Arthur that credit that he is due.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
well deserved. And Mary too. I mean, I've always liked Mary. I think Mary has always been the backbone of Tom because everything Tom, I mean, even in season 1, Tom was desperate that Mary would not see his failures. He wanted to be not wealthy necessarily, but he wanted to be a success. That word doesn't sound right coming out. He wanted to be success for Mary. He wanted to do these great big things because he wanted Mary to be proud of him. And Mary is not someone who allows someone else to be trampled over. She does not condone deceit. She does not condone cruelty, and she does not condone anything like that of any kind. And so she has kind of always been his backbone. In season 2, she's coming off the knowledge of knowing what Tom hid from her and not allowing it anymore. She's not going to stand for that anymore. She's going to be involved because and I love that. I know it's season 1, but I love that line from season 1 where she's talking about how he used to tell her everything. Basically, I'm hugely paraphrasing, but she's essentially saying, we used to be partners and now we aren't
Right.
anymore. And so season 2, she enforces that. No, we are doing this together.
Right.
They're
Yes.
Georgiana's guardians together. And I mean, yeah, Mary was trying to get Georgiana married off, but that was because she felt it was in Georgiana's best interest. It wasn't to get rid of her. It wasn't to punish her. It was because she truly thought, you are a woman in this time period. Marriage is what's safest and what's best for you. She wasn't doing it to be cruel. She was doing it because she thought it was the best course of action for Georgiana.
And she backed off when Georgiana said, I don't want any more marriage proposals. You know, so she respected that for
She
sure.
did.
She was just trying to be a good parent, as it were. And Mary, you know, of course, one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing is when Mary finally says to Tom about, did you not work it out that Sydney and Charlotte were in love?
Somebody
You
had to say it
know,
to that man.
I mean, it was like, open your eyes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that was a favorite moment. And then when he says something to Charlotte so that Charlotte understands
Yeah.
that he knows it. And for one thing, that way he could be more open with them about her mourning, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a great moment. And then when so Tom goes to tell Mary about what's going on. And Mary tells Tom after that card game, which why I couldn't remember this the last time we discussed this, I don't know. But the card game was with Lady D, Mary, and Esther and Clara.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is one of the times that Esther behaves like she's on laudanum, which she is. But that's when Lady D tells Mary all about what she's found out from her friend from another town and how they can't trust the colonel and that the military has screwed up other towns, has left them high and dry. And so, boy, I'm good at cliches. But anyway, so that's when Mary takes that information back to Tom.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get confronted by the townspeople and they're trying to get away from, you know. So Mary is so instrumental in keeping them going on the right course and taking the step of saying, let's use the children's money until we can find another solution.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Tom steps up to the plate, another cliche, and says, you know, he and Arthur go about getting the money taken care of and the money for the shopkeepers. So it was just, you know, we didn't get happily ever after for Charlotte in this season, but we got really great things for other people, and especially for Tom and Mary and the town, and yes, for Georgiana, because she avoided being in a worse situation with Lockhart.
I don't think we got really happily ever after for anyone really, but that's a typical Jane Austen novel, right? You don't get your happily ever after until the end.
Well, we did for
Esther and Babington,
Allison and
Fraser.
So we had happy endings for people, or at least happy things happen.
Yeah.
Just Charlotte's was not.
It's coming. It has to be a slow burn. That's the way Jane Austen writes. Slow burn. But with Mary, I think that scene where she offers up her children's money is so indicative of who she is as a person. And I mean, before she wasn't content to be in the background. She didn't like it at all. You could see that all through season 1. She knew something was wrong. She didn't like it, but she didn't feel it was her place to push it. But in season 2, it's no, I have a responsibility to these people. We brought this in. we are a team, so I have a responsibility just as much as you to make sure that our people are taken care of. And I think that really shows the mettle of her, because she's a mom who loves her kids, who wants her kids to do well and have the funds that they need. But it was also showed a faith in Tom that that money was going to come back at some point.
Right.
But even so, like I was just reading, we at youth group last night, I taught on Daniel 3, where they were like, if you throw us into the furnace, our God will save us. But even if he doesn't, and that's kind of where Mary's faith is that, you know what, this is what is the right thing to do. I have faith that it's going to come back, but even if it doesn't, this is what's right. So we are going to go forward and we are going to do it this way. Of course, Tom made it so that she didn't have to do that, but that's who Mary is. And we get to see a little more of her mettle in season 3. And I really, really like watching that come out. Even with like Lockhart, Georgiana, Lockhart picked up on the fact that Mary knew what he was. Not in totality, but she had that inkling something's not right here. And that's why he kept trying to pull Georgiana away from Mary. And that's why he kept trying to ostracize Georgiana from Mary of, oh, she's your jailer. She's not really your friend, because he could see that she was. A master con man and swindler is going to be able to pick up on that. And that's what Charles Lockhart is. And that's what he picked up on Mary, is that Mary is intuitive and she is smart. And she's going to protect and stand up for the people that she loves. And we got to see a lot more of that in season 2, I feel like.
I agree. But even going back to season 1, I think back, reflect on the fact that so much of what we learn about people and their characters comes through Mary. True characters, for instance, we get really put off by Sydney in the beginning. I mean, the way he treats Charlotte, we're all like mad at him. But yet we know that Mary has a high opinion of him. So we're just waiting for that to show up, for us to be able to have a high opinion of him. And she has so much respect for him. And it's, aside from the things that he did with Charlotte, somewhat defensively, but also out of ignorance and, things that he felt insulted, I guess, about his family up on the balcony. I think it was way over the top. But
I think he was insulted in that way because she was right and he was very
hit a sore point.
Yeah, like no one knew that, but she found it out, and I think it scared him a little bit.
Yeah, right. But because we kept hearing from Mary how good Sydney was, we were ready to see that side of him.
Yeah, for sure.
And we
do want to like who Mary likes.
Yeah. We know that the story is told a lot through Charlotte's eyes, but we also see a lot of it through Mary's eyes. Yeah.
I do feel like we didn't get enough of her in season 2, though.
Of Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have used more. Although, I mean, he did. I think maybe we missed pieces of it, because see what a friend she was to Allison too, and how much she was trying to help Allison, which goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And how concerned she is about Georgiana. And I was hoping that Charlotte would be her friend, and Arthur speaks up and says, I'll take care of her, basically. I'm going to Georgiana's friend. So, and so I think, and of course she expresses concern, like Allison does, about Charlotte being a
governess.
Governess. I was going to say guardian, and that's not right. Governess. Yeah. And so they were in that together. So she's woven throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
We just spend too much time, as much time on her. And also she and Charlotte don't spend a lot of time together.
I think that's maybe what it is.
Yeah. Whereas before we see them together a lot in the first season, and not so much in the second season.
Yeah. I think maybe that's why it feels that way for me, because she is peppered through, but the glimpses we get of her are short, even though she has a hand in every storyline. I mean, it's not that she was in quite a bit. I want her to be like a forerunner character. I want her to have like the same level as Charlotte, because I love Mary and I like watching what she does. And I think that I know she can't be the same level of Charlotte because it's not a story about Mary. So I get that. But I think that watching her care for the people around her is really beautiful and it's really sweet. And I think watching the kind of human being she is really good. And she's already married. She already has her kids. So now she's caring for the next people who she has that are in her life that need that same sort of direction or that same sort of pull.
And we had less time this season with her
Yeah.
and the kids.
Mhm.
The kids were really in very
I don't remember
little.
seeing them really at all. I mean, I've seen
Well,
them, I can remember, but not much.
mostly it was just when Charlotte and Allison arrived from the carriage and they all went in the house, and there wasn't too much,
No,
maybe eating at the breakfast dinner. Were they there?
I
But
think
other than
so.
that, we really don't see them as much as we did in the first season. So
Yeah.
that might be another reason why you feel that way,
Mhm.
because we saw her more with Charlotte, more with her kids, even some with Lady D with the,
Yeah.
whereas when they're at the big dinner, we don't see much of her. Anyway,
And there
yeah,
were way more characters in season 2. So it kind of felt like that was a lot of the mains that we didn't get enough because they had to focus on so many different parts that had
yeah,
to work together to make one cohesive season. So I think that makes sense that we got less of everybody to include everybody and to make the story work and function. It had to be that way. I just miss her.
right. And then I'm also thinking about the scene where they're at the garden party, and uh Mrs. Hankins comes to her and says, I can't find Georgiana anywhere. For this is a repeated situation. With before in the season 1, it was her governess,
Yeah. Who was in
Georgiana's.
love with Mr. Hankins. So still a Hankins connection.
Right, right. And this time it's Miss Hankins that can't find her. And so it is Mary and Miss Hankins that find Georgiana and Lockhart about to embrace,
Yeah.
and they interrupted. And of course, Mary, as you said, she's very smart and intuitive, and she picks up on that right away. I mean, she picks up on the Charlotte being in love with Sydney without Charlotte or Sydney saying anything to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
She watches.
yeah, she's observant.
Yeah. She's invested in the people she cares about.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think even with Georgiana, when they found that letter of who Charles Lockhart was, the compassion that swept over Mary, it's nothing new, but we got to see it in a much more poignant way when
Yeah,
she had to comfort Georgiana. That not only A was Charles Lockhart a horrible person, or not who he said he was, but her mother was also alive. I mean, these big, huge things, and Mary got to be the one to stand next to her while she delivered these news, and the waves of compassion that came off of her were so right to her character.
yeah, and absolutely. And Mary really is in so many scenes, maybe in small ways, but she is a thread common throughout. I mean, she moves between, the only place we really don't see her involved is with Esther and Clara and
Edward.
Edward. Otherwise, we see her interacting with all the other characters
Yeah.
at some time or another.
Yeah.
Well, not some of the military people, but
Even then though, I mean,
otherwise.
we see her interact with Carter, she interacts with Fraser, she interacts with Lennox,
Yeah,
the main
yeah,
people.
yeah, she does. And so we don't see her, and even at the garden party, she makes a point of that Tom should introduce her to Colburn, so she talks with him.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's definitely such a supportive person, and kind of the glue that holds a lot
Oh, for
together.
sure. Yeah, like I said, without her, I don't think Tom would be half the man he is. And I
Right.
don't think he would have any success without Mary, because I really do think she's the backbone that holds him upright.
Of course, she even had with as I'm backing up on this because she had that card game with Esther and Clara and Dr. Lady D. So she did have interaction even with them.
I think she did with almost everybody this season. It was just small pieces at a time.
Right, but not Edward. Probably he's the exception. But he's such a villain.
Mary doesn't need to be in the same room as him.
No.
But I mean, as a whole, it was really nice to see the Parkers, because it wasn't like it was an unnatural growth. It wasn't like it was, whoa, who are these people? It felt like something that they would naturally glide into after the end of last season. It felt right. It made sense how they grew. It made sense where they changed and where they altered. They wrote it really good transition from season 1 to season 2 for the Parkers. And it was smooth, and it made absolute sense to see how they were. And the pieces that they hit harder, like with Mary, they showcased more things, more in depth, because it would have been her standing more firm on those things since the end of season 1. So I think it was really nice to see how they wrote that in, and how, because you couldn't write a season 2 after that without everyone being affected. Like, they couldn't be unaffected. So it was nice to see them write that in. It was nice to see them grow. And it was nice to see them work together and function together. And I like that. I really enjoyed it.
It will be interesting to see what they do with all 3 of these characters in the next season. I mean, I'm sure they will still be there playing similar roles, but will there be a theater? Will there be something else Arthur takes up?
Yeah.
The fact that we know that Lady Susan is going to be there along with Colburn's brother. Brings up all kinds of interesting possibilities.
And I think she'll walk side by side with Georgiana as she searches for her mom. I think she's going to be right there.
I think I think she and to some extent Charlotte. It'll be interesting to see what they do. And so I was just thinking too that Mary was kind of the person in this season that was the helper to everyone. More so than Charlotte this season.
I agree.
Charlotte was very, very much a helper as a governess to Colburn's family, but not as much in some other areas as she was last season.
Mary was more hands-on this season, so Charlotte didn't have to be. Right.
And something that kind of clicked in my head the other day that I was like, why did I miss that? They've announced that one of the new actors, or at least it came out, that one of the new actors that's going to be in season 3 is an actor who's playing the part of Lady Denham's first love.
Oh,
yeah,
that's exciting.
In the same place where I saw about Lady Susan and Colburn's brother Sam. They said that other actor was going to be Lady D's first love.
That's exciting.
What was the name? Rupert, or
I think so. I think I just approved something. I think I just approved a post about that in our Sanditon Chronicles Facebook group.
Yeah. So
good things are happening.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I can hardly wait.
I know. I want it here so bad. So we're gonna try to fill your time with stuff while we wait. It's not that far now, right? It's what, March of next year? Same as it was this year?
That's what we think. Yeah.
So it was October, November, December, January, February, March. Yeah, somewhere between 5 and 6 months. That's not that far now. we can stop saying a year. Yay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try to fill your time. And next week we are not going to be put out a regular episode. It'll be just me doing a live next Saturday, and I will keep tuned to our channel. I'll let you know what time we're going to be going out, but next Saturday, the 16th, we will have a live. So get ready to come on and talk with us and chat away about whatever we want to talk about. So that's what's coming at you next, and we will see you real soon. Bye, guys.
Sounds great. Bye.
Are you craving more TSC content? Head on over to our social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. Also, check out our website, thesanditonchronicles.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. Email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in every week for new episodes.